Lagos, the nation's commercial capital. This is the news at 10, live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Ijoma Oyato.
Hello and welcome. Tonight, Ekiti boils again. State Governor Kayode Fayemi imposes dusk to dawn curfew to prevent more killing and mayhem in the state. Senate President gives assurances on quick passage of petroleum industry bill before the end of the year. Nigeria at 54, economy comes under assessment. I'll be joined by the Director General of the LCCI, Dr. Huda Yusuf. An American-led airstrikes on Islamic State militants intensify raids in Syria.
On Business News tonight, Senate President David Mark urges Nigerian businessmen to be more involved in democratic discourse of the nation.
While on sports news, Vincent Inyama and Victor Moses return to Super Eagles squad as Super Eagles coach Stephen Keshi calls up 5 new players for next month's 2015 African Cup of Nations qualifiers against the Sudan.
Ekiti, the Ekiti state capital, is in the news yet again, but for all the wrong reasons. Today, the Ekiti state governor, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, declared a dusk to dawn curfew industry bill before the end of the year. Nigeria at 54, economy comes under assessment. I'll be joined by the Director General of the LCCI, Dr. Huda Yusuf. An American-led airstrikes on Islamic State militants intensify raids in Syria.
On Business News tonight, Senate President David Mark urges Nigerian businessmen to be more involved in democratic discourse of the nation.
While on sports news, Vincent Inyama and Victor Moses return to Super Eagles squad as Super Eagles coach Stephen Keshi calls up 5 new players for next month's 2015 African Cup of Nations qualifiers against the Sudan.
Ekiti, the Ekiti state capital, is in the news yet again, but for all the wrong reasons. Today, the Ekiti state governor, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, declared a dusk to dawn curfew after thugs took to the streets, causing chaos. Trouble started when a former state chairman of the National Union of Road Transport Workers, Chief Omolafe Aderie, was shot dead by unknown gunmen last night. As soon as his supporters got wind of his death, they took to the streets, causing mayhem and vandalizing property. The spokesperson for the Ekiti State Police Command, Olu Babayemi, confirmed the incident, and as we speak, the curfew is still in effect. Other security operatives have also teamed up with the police to restore order.
It all started here in this courtroom. The chairman of the Election Tribunal, Justice Muhammadu Suraju, reportedly beaten by hoodlums. The situation became ugly and the police intervened. No one knew what was to come, but it was clear trouble is on the loose. That same night, a leader of the transport union was killed. A man purported to have led a group to the courtroom for the beating of judicial officials. By morning, the situation has gone from bad to worse. Houses burned, bonfires at crossroads, and the streets of Ekiti, the capital of the state, left in tatters. The disaster has escalated on a large scale. Streets deserted and emergency officials battle to put out the fire. It's a dire situation, and the chief security officer of the state was forced to action to stop the free-for-all.
I have taken the decision to institute a dusk-to-dawn curfew in the state immediately. Accordingly, there will be no movement between the hours of 7 p.m. and 7 a.m., and security agencies have been advised to effect this curfew maximally.
Movement restricted, curfew imposed, a directive that has no end in sight.
The curfew will last until further notice. Let us work together to stop the violence and brigandage that has brought about serious embarrassment to our state in the last few days.
The police are on the alert. They say they have murdered sleep, and the troublemakers too must be ready for the consequence now.
We made several number of arrests because some people were actually caught right on the scene, burning houses. Some were seen, trying to picket roads. Some were seen burning tires. We have ample facts against them, and investigation is ongoing. We have serious security situation at hand now, and I think the curfew is extremely necessary. It will lessen our burden. We've been out since morning. And of course, the curfew means you are supposed to stay in your houses, your individual houses. If you are found on the street, you have to settle blame.
At the home of the slain NURTW leader, the family is in mourning, and ceaseless tears roll down the cheeks of relatives. Governor Fayemi arrives and meets with the widow as he consoles her. It's a few days to the inauguration of the governor-elect in Ekiti State, a state referred to as a state of honor has drifted. The desperate measures put in place is highly needed, at least to stop the senseless killing and destruction of properties. Sheung Okimbaloye, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, in a strongly worded statement, the Nigerian Bar Association has condemned what it terms despicable acts by hoodlums who disrupted the High Court of Justice complex in Ado-Ekiti, the state capital. The association says it believes the thugs are acting on instructions from some highly placed persons in Ekiti state to unleash mayhem on judicial officers and infrastructure. It said that the administration of justice can never thrive in an atmosphere where judicial officers are brazenly attacked or intimidated in the course of carrying out their lawful duties. The NBA says it's sending a high-powered fact-finding team to Ekiti to investigate the matter, and any person, no matter how highly placed, who is found to be involved in this show of shame will be prosecuted. To security matters, and the alleged mastermind of the Nyanya bomb explosion, Aminu Ogwuche, was absent from court again today, stalling the trial of the twin blasts in the satellite town of the Federal Capital Territory. However, lawyers to the police and the Department of State Services who were in court argued yet again over who had the right to prosecute the man accused of killing dozens of people on their way to work in the morning of April the 14th. Ogwuche, who had fled to Sudan, was brought back to Nigeria with the help of Interpol to face terror charges. He has since been remanded in the custody of the Department of State Services. Our correspondent Amaka Okafor reports.
In what looked like a scene from a movie, the police and the Department of State Services engaged in a war of words over which government agency should prosecute Mr. Aminu Ogwuche, the alleged mastermind of the Nyanya bombing on April 14th this year. When the case was called up, the accused was not in court. Lawyer to the police, Oloye Torugene, applied for an adjournment and an order to compel the Department of State Services to produce Mr. Ogwuche in court to answer charges against him. But in a swift response, lawyer to the Department of State Services, Clifford Osage, said his agency is the one in charge of the case. He told the court that the Department of State Services had filed charges against the accused person before the request for his extradition by the Interpol. Osage said the DSS is in possession of an order to remand Mr. Ogwuche for 90 days to enable it carry out further investigation before a case can be established against him. He argued that the police is no longer in charge of the case and should withdraw the charges filed against the accused.
Certain procedures have to be followed because of national security.
So what procedure would have to be followed for the accused to be brought before the court?
The accused will be brought on the next adjourned date.
Why was he not brought today?
I've already told the court why the accused is not in court.
Following the face of Justice Ademola ordered that Ogwuche be produced in court on the 10th of November 2014. In a separate case at the court, one Kelvin Ezigbe and 4 others were arraigned on 12-count charges of terrorism and kidnap of Lagos lawyer Chief Mike Ozokome. The 4 accused persons all pleaded not guilty to the charges. They, however, complained to the court of allegations of maltreatment and torture in the detention facilities of the Department of State Services. Lawyer to the government, however, refuted their claim, saying the complaints of the accused persons is a ploy to make the courts transfer them to prison custody, where they had earlier escaped and in the process killed 5 police officers and 2 prison warders.
Actually, there was a lot of concern because the accused persons are not well fed in prison. They've been maltreated and a lot of things are happening there. So as a result, we have to bring it to the notice of the court. That was what we actually did, and the court had to intervene in the matter. We want them to be properly treated in as much as the accused persons, they are not convicts. Yes, they are presumed innocent at this stage. So we want them to be protected, given the due process. Let them go through the due process. And
note that the 2 witnesses called by the EFCC did more harm than good to the case of the prosecution, as they failed to prove the allegations against the accused persons. The Lagos Speaker, Honorable Ikuforiji, and his aide were charged to court by the EFCC in December 2011. The EFCC had alleged that the defendants had between April 2012 and July 2011 conspired and accepted various cash payments amounting to 503 million naira from the House without going through a financial institution. Meanwhile, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission says it will appeal against the ruling. The EFCC, apparently unsatisfied with the decision to set free the Speaker and his aide, insists justice was not served. For the EFCC, quote, "The learned judge erred in his ruling, as the proof of evidence to the charge clearly showed that the provisions of the Money Laundering Act had been violated by the accused persons in receiving various cash payments from the Assembly amounting to 338.8 million naira. The Commission stated that it will explore the option to appeal to bring the accused persons to justice. In part 2, after the break, Nigeria at 54, economy comes on the focus. That's in a moment. Do join us again.